Tommy, it's great to be back, isn't it? But the most important question before we introduce our guest is, have you ever heard of Accrington Stanley?
What did you say? Can you repeat?
Accrington Stanley.
Well, number one, I wouldn't know how to spell the two words that you just mentioned, but no, I have never heard about it, and I'm very excited to have this guest on to discuss this and more.
Yes, well, this guest has appeared at Accrington Stanley as well as a number of other clubs in his career, totaling 300 appearances and scoring approximately around 27 goals, according to Wikipedia. We are welcomed and by the presence of Piero Mingoia. So, Piero, nice to have you on the Anglo-Italian podcast. How are you doing?
All good, thank you. Thanks for having me on, Tommy, Adam. 27 goals. I think Wikipedia might be a little bit too kind. It might give me 3 or 4 extra, but I'll take it.
No, definitely. And I think we have to kind of tell our listeners and viewers, make sure you search for various goals at Accrington Stanley and Cambridge United, where you did kind of have a number of belters in you. That's for sure. But let's start by talking about how you got into football, more importantly, and how was your career path before you kind of reached the first club, which was Watford?
So yeah, pretty standard, to be honest. You know, start playing for your school team, then you realise, you know, you might be quite good at this. So friends join a local team, so you go along. I joined that team, which is a team in North London. Enfield was where I'm originally from. Played for them for maybe 3-4 years. Had lots of fun. As a kid, that's the best time of your footballing time, because you're just playing with your friends. If you've got a good team, you're winning trophies, you're winning games, you're playing like they say, a kid free in the park, just no fear, you're just playing. And then at all sorts of those levels, there's scouts kind of going around matches, having a look. Had a couple teams interested. I decided to go to Watford because one of my teammates was already there. And I was pretty shy as a kid, so it made me feel more comfortable to go there because I knew somebody. 6-week trial, and then got signed up. I think it was under 13s, under 14s.
Very nice. I wanted to ask you, what about your Italian heritage before we start? You were born in London. Are both of your parents Italian?
Yeah, both my parents are Italian, originally from Sicily.
All right, very nice, very nice. Do you ever visit back in the beautiful country, Bel Paese?
Every year, without doubt. I got lots of family and friends over there, so I'll be going in August to see my family with my wife. I'll bring my daughter. Yeah, no, for me it's literally like another home. I've been going all my life, and for me it's a special place.
Do you think your Italian heritage has had a sort of influence in your love for football? Is it something that was very heavy in your family, like being football fans, being passionate about the sport?
Yeah, my dad's a big football fan. So growing up, you could get kind of Italian TV over in England. I remember him listening to AC Milan matches on the radio. That's how far back I can remember.
Great. This is the moment where we move on from the Italian football-related questions. Yeah.
And normally in those days, AC Milan were winning pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So it was good times.
We are the same age. I remember those years with a lot of dread. Yes.
Yeah. And then just as I got older, that was always on the TV, and then that's my team. I don't support anybody in England. I make sure I watch every AC Milan game, and I follow Italian football every day. So yeah, that's probably my number one league, to be honest.
Very nice. I'll let you go, Adam.
No, thank you. Well, Piero, let's take you back to Watford then. Obviously, you spent 3 years down there. But it was in particular your last season there that you made a numerous amount of loan deals, in particular Accrington, which sort of made an impression on your career, certainly. But yeah, how would you reflect on your time at Watford? Because in particular, that last season, you obviously got to experience Gianfranco Zola in that kind of hierarchy, obviously, who was trying to lead Watford into the Premier League at the time. So it must have been a bit of a surreal experience, kind of seeing a legend at the time as well, being a manager.
Yeah, so my time at Watford, I was there from 13 to 21. So yeah, as a professional, 3 years, but I was there 8 or 9 years. So that kind of obviously quite a huge impact on my development as a player and as a person. And I was fortunate through that period to have worked with some unbelievable coaches who are now at top clubs in various roles all over the country. So very, very fortunate for that. And yeah, like my last season, obviously the Pozzo family took over. I knew a bit about them because of their model with Udinese and Granada. And at the time, Udinese were doing pretty well, kind of flirting with the Champions League a little bit when they had Di Natale kind of leading the way. And Zola come in, and obviously as an Italian, Gianfranco Zola, he's an absolute legend. So to be able to work with him for the couple months that I did was a privilege and something that you can kind of never take away.
What is the best thing you remember about Zola as a coach?
He was just a genuine, nice person who cared. He cared about the players. He come in and he kind of had this thing where he was very relaxed in a good way, not too relaxed, but he would let you play freely, where some managers like to kind of put lots of pressure on you and almost tell you how to play. He was a bit more laid back, which allowed you to kind of express yourself without thinking, if I make a mistake, he's going to kind of rip my head off. So it was very enjoyable to play. And to be honest, I probably sounds silly because I ended up going on loan and stuff, but it was one of the best pre-seasons of my life when he came in, out of my career. It was, I don't know, I just thoroughly enjoyed it, to be honest.
I don't think we have mentioned this. What position have you played for our listeners? What position have you mainly played throughout your career?
So in midfield, on the left, on the right, in the middle, but mainly, if I look back, spent most of my time on the right-hand side.
Yeah, no, Tommy, I mean, there was a particular game against Wycombe Wanderers where he, pretty much domed that midfield at one point. I can remember some really good performances by Piero, not to suck up by any means. Piero, let's talk about the managers, because you've got a fascinating list of managers as well, especially in your Accrington days as well. So, obviously you started off with Paul Cook. You had the likes of James Beattie as well and John Coleman. But I think what I kind of remember from those Accrington days when you were playing, particularly for that club, was there wasn't kind of a high expectation on you guys, but you kind of seemed to progress season upon season. And in particular, that last season with John Coleman was an interesting one as well. But yeah, could you talk to listeners and viewers as well, in particular, about those managers? Because, a lot of, I'd say, probably lower league English fans will reminisce about those characters. Does there any particular strengths or weaknesses or attributes that you kind of learned from these guys?
Yeah, I think throughout, as you go through a football career, you learn from every manager you work with. Whether you like them or whether you think they're good or not, there's always something to learn. And they're all kind of different in their own way, and they all made an impact in their own way. Paul Cook, obviously, was my first loan spell away from Watford up north. So that was straight away, it was a kind of a reality check for me, because obviously I'd come through and you've been kind of pampered and looked after in the Watford Academy. To go to Accrington, who at the time didn't even have a training ground. You really have to kind of get your head down and work hard, and without no moaning, really, no ego, and you just get on with it. Then James Beattie took over. He just finished playing, so obviously it was a new experience for him. But again, he was a real players manager. He really looked after the players, so you do anything for him. And then John Coleman, again, he obviously very experienced, and his record speaks for itself, to be honest. But all of them wanted to play football in the right way, which, as a player coming through Watford Academy at the time, not the biggest, not the tallest, playing football the right way is kind of something that suited me.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask you, from that kind of loan spell that you initially had, was that a huge kind of learning curve in your career? Because obviously you were used to the academy set up at Watford and you're going into proper football, as they kind of call it, because you're in a raw environment where you're playing with real men, supposedly. So, yeah, I mean, it was an interesting kind of club for you to kind of pick, I suppose, at the time, right?
I didn't necessarily pick it. It was kind of like one of the few that came in, to be honest. So and I'm very grateful for that because they did end up gave me a chance of actually having a kind of a 10, 12-year career. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I could have ended up, to be honest. So that, I'm forever grateful for that. But yeah, it's a reality check. And if you're a little bit kind of stuck up in a footballing way and you're not willing to work hard, it's a sink or swim moment, to be honest.
No, definitely. So after about 3 seasons, you then decided to move closer to home. You decided to make that plunge with Cambridge United. And at that point, I remember Cambridge United on paper seemed to be building this really good side at the time. They had Sean Derry as manager. And I suppose the expectations were potentially that you should be challenging for the top half of the league at the time. What was your thoughts going into that kind of season? Because obviously, I think you were blessed with a number of good players then, weren't you?
Yeah, so really looking forward to it. Getting closer to home, which has always been something that has made me feel that I needed. To be honest, I didn't never like kind of being too far. Being by yourself's a bit boring, and I like to share kind of moments with family. Maybe come from my Italian kind of heritage. That
I was going to say exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you share all your good moments with family. Otherwise, what's the point in being by myself? And it's not the same for me. So I like to have people around me to share moments with. And yeah, like you say, it was a different being at Accrington. We've done really well, but with no expectation. And Cambridge going to a big city, good footballing history. All of a sudden, there was an expectation. And I think we found it difficult because we had some good players, but it never really fully kind of worked. But the expectation, I think the expectation made people unhappy instead of actually seeing us for what we were at that time. And I think we finished in the best possible position we could finish. But because of that expectation, I think sometimes you can never please because they expect that, but maybe you can't give them that. So for them, it's kind of like a failure. Where team like Accrington at the time, those smaller teams, they have no expectation, so they're always happy. So the environment's different.
Yeah, definitely. And did you find behind the scenes also that to be reflective, that the atmosphere was different compared to what you had at Accrington? Because if I remember rightly from the times that I saw Accrington, you definitely felt like you were a team that you worked for each other, you worked hard. I don't necessarily say that wasn't the case with Cambridge, but certainly I would say I've seen it with my own club where players have joined us and they've kind of reflected on the experience being a bit different to where they previously have been. So was that the same at Cambridge?
Yeah, I think it was the same. The group of boys and the staff were really good. Like, it was a really honest group. But I think at the time, Cambridge had signed some players, I think a year before, 2 years before, after they drew Man United in the FA Cup, and obviously they got a decent amount of money. I think they signed quite a few players on big contracts. So as that, and they didn't go up. So as time goes on, behind the scenes, they may be trying to get players off the wage bill. Some players they don't fancy. So there's always these little situations going on that's not always kind of perfect for the environment. And I think as they resolve that, in later years, you see now Cambridge is a really honest kind of, the club seems like it's moving in the right direction. So I think it was just that period where they'd signed some big characters, big experienced players on quite a bit of money, and some didn't work out. So then they've got to try and get them out, and maybe some players don't want to leave. So there's all these little things going on that kind of sometimes upset the environment without even realising, because everyone's still trying to work hard,
Yeah.
but there's just always little bits going on that maybe distract everyone.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there was a lot of pressure on Sean Derry, if I remember rightly, even at the time, and going into that second season, obviously it didn't work out because by February he was moved on. But you did kind of then yourself end up back at Accrington. But it was only for part of the season because then you got loaned out to Morecambe. So I suppose we're going to allude to this point, but yeah, we're going into that path where you're kind of unsure about your direction of your future, where it's going. I suppose, was that kind of a nervous moment when you kind of brought into a team for half a season, then to suddenly find yourself having to go on loan somewhere? Or did you find that as kind of refreshing, try and experience something different as well at the same time?
Oh, the loan spell was, looking back, probably the most I enjoyed football in my last few years, to be honest. It was absolutely brilliant. Going to Accrington, I got injured for Cambridge and I hadn't played a game probably for about 5-6 months. And then obviously going to a team who just won League Two, it was always going to be difficult to get into the team. Plus, obviously, not really being match fit. I was definitely lacking something, just because I hadn't played football for a long time. And obviously, you can train as much as you want, but even just getting confidence from the matches, I needed that. So when it come to January, I just said if I could go on loan. And Jim Bentley at Morecambe, who I'd played against plenty of times, called me up, gave me a good chat, and just said, I just want you to play what you're good at, play to your strengths, get crosses into the box, and that was my game. So went along there, and the group of lads was very similar to Accrington, kind of no egos, everybody's in it together. And yeah, we had a brilliant end to the season. And like I say, it was those 3 months I look back on very fondly.
Yeah.
And how is it to enjoy so much a loan spell, but then knowing that it's a limited experience? At some point, you will have to go back.
I think you just enjoy. I knew the season was ending, so I knew I was going to end the season with this team, and just get involved. And I just pretended like I was going to stay there for 2 years. Just get involved and do my best. Don't think I'm on loan, and no, once you're there, you're one of the players. You're a Morecambe player for 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah, maybe you've got, maybe I feel like the stress levels even go down, like you have really nothing to lose. You're there on loan, you're there for a limited amount of time, you're going to play with your head freer than you would otherwise. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but then also at the time, for me, it was, I'm playing basically to show teams that I can still play. And maybe someone down south in London or closer to home can see me. So in one way, I was playing to show my ability still. So sometimes the stress goes up, because in those games, if I play and I'm not playing well, then nobody's going to want you. And I realised I wasn't going to kind of get back into Accrington's team. And I kind of, in that moment, that's when I decided I was going to move back down south and start kind of moving forward.
And I did see, obviously, after that spell, you kind of moved on to Boreham Wood, which for many of our Italian listeners, they probably haven't heard of, but that's a Conference League side. And you had a really successful first season there as well, because you ended up in the playoffs and scoring a goal in that run as well. So how do you reflect on your time in the conference? Because I know in England, we kind of talk about the levels between sort of League Two and Conference being non-existent these days, especially given the kind of budget differences between the two leagues as well. So are you finding that the Conference is maybe more competitive to an extent than what is in League Two at the moment?
Yeah, I enjoyed that spell. Obviously, COVID and stuff happened. So that really disrupted a few things. But good club, good manager. Met some good people along the way, and like you say, for me, that I don't think there's much difference between League Two and the Conference. I'm kind of part of the argument. I say it should be called League Three, because now all the teams are basically full time.
Yeah,
and there isn't much difference. And as you see, teams that normally get promoted from the Conference end up finishing pretty high in League Two straight away. So it says there's big clubs in that league now, and it needs to get the respect it deserves. Maybe they should change the automatics to maybe 2 and a playoff place, because it's extreme.
Yeah.
Once you fall into that league, it's extremely hard to get out. You can have a great season and still fall short. So yeah, maybe that's something to look at. But I think you need the EFL clubs to agree to that, and I don't think many would, to be honest.
Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, Tommy, for your benefit, obviously we've got the likes of Wrexham, who are owned by Ryan Reynolds, and they're in the conference and they're trying their best to get out of that league, but spending a lot of money in the process as well. So, but back to you, Piero. We wanted to really capture the point of view of a footballer, especially when they've been told from a club that they're not going to be contracted for the next season. So in that kind of space, what is the thoughts of a player? I mean, are you very reliant on your agent if you have one, or are you kind of reliant on the network of people that you know to kind of help you out in this kind of, I suppose, circumstance? Because, I mean, when I talk about my kind of career, professional career, I don't kind of naturally feel that there's an issue if I was to move out of the industry, because I would have maybe a career path lined up. But for a footballer, it's completely different. And you're having to kind of reach out to people and sell yourself to an extent. So, yeah, I suppose from a fan's perspective, can you try and explain to us how that experience is for you as a footballer?
Okay, so normally most clubs, unless you're kind of in the playoffs or competing for a title or something, they'll normally let you know maybe a week or two before the end of the season that maybe they're not renewing your contract. And then basically you've got around 2 months to kind of find something, line something up before pre-season starts. In an ideal world, you'd like to be somewhere when pre-season starts. That's not always the case. And when you're younger, I think you're relying a lot on an agent or someone external, because you won't know too many people in the game. Your network won't be that big. As you get older, it might be a bit of both. If you've got an agent that you can trust, and I say that kind of the word trust is important, because there's so many these days that anybody can be an agent, and I don't think that's great for the sport, because I think it's an extremely important role, and there's some people just doing it that are not up to the levels that it should be. And obviously, as you get older, you know more people in the game, coaches, managers, people that you've worked with, and they might be able to help you along the way. But it's not a nice period. Normally, what people don't know, I don't think, is if you're in the EFL and upwards, your contract runs out 30th of June normally. So you get paid then. So that covers you for July. And then if you haven't found the club by, I think it's the end of July, you will get an extra month severance pay. So really, you're kind of covered until end of August, September, really, right, financially. So that kind of helps people out if they don't find a club straight away. But obviously, if you haven't found a club by then, it's obviously maybe time to drop down levels, or, because if clubs want you, they kind of sign you up definitely before the season starts. So if you don't have a club by the time the season starts, it's pretty, it's quite an important moment, to be honest.
And what do you think about the roles of agents then? Because I know previously speaking to Tom Haitley, he kind of talks about the positive aspects as well of an agent, for example, where his experience was he was brought away from UK, went abroad, for example. And what the agent did, and he was lucky to have a really good one, was that he helped him set up in that country, for example. But as you've alluded to, there is some really bad ones as well. There's ones that proclaim to be an agent but don't look at the player's interests. So yeah, do you think there should be some sort of governance with this? Because we're kind of seeing as a fan's topic about the likes of Mino Raiola and the likes, for example, that earn a lot of money, but the question mark for a lot of fans is, what do they actually do? Like, what is it that they benefit their clients? So yeah, from your point of view, should there be some sort of governance around what they actually do?
Yeah, I think those top guys, I think they're very good. And you see the players when they speak about, obviously you see they speak about Raiola when he passed away. Unfortunately, the message was all the same: is he would do anything for his players, and he'll fight to get the best deal for his players. So I think the big companies, the people at the top, I think they do things properly. I think it's as you go down, maybe lower leagues and stuff, and you just see people popping up saying agents and players and parents out of fear, desperation, to try and move up, will sign with anyone. When that happens, I think it's a dangerous game because you're trusting people that shouldn't be trusted sometimes.
Yeah, and you're kind of playing with people's lives, and the wrong move just for the benefit, just for the profit that the agent is making, it could be a turning point in your career for the worse. So it's definitely tough. I wanted to ask you one thing. Have you ever received any offers? Have you ever been in touch with any Italian clubs throughout your career?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't never an option for me, to be honest, because I was playing in the lower leagues, still professional, and for me there isn't a better setup than England for the lower leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there wasn't really an option to kind of go to Italy because I don't think that the infrastructure and the way it's set up is as good as England. So that's the reason why.
100% agreed on that one. 100% agreed. Once you're in England, the home of lower league football, why on earth would you travel back to Italy and go play in these places without any infrastructure, as you said? Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. So Piero, let's talk a little bit back to your kind of career, and let's talk about players that you've played with. So who was the best player that you managed to play with?
Ooh.
Or against?
So against, this is always an interesting one. So when we were at Watford, we had, like I said, we had some good coaches with some good contacts. And when we were 15, 16, the youth team got asked to play a friendly against Inter at Inter's training ground, which are called Piano Gentile.
Piano Gentile, yeah, just
Yes.
1 hour north of Milan, almost on the border with Switzerland. A beautiful place, by the way.
So we should have been playing under 19 Inter. Mm-hmm. So we went along.
What year? Do you remember?
Maybe 2010.
Ooh, the year for Inter Milan.
The year, I think.
The year.
But it might have been the end of 2009.
Okay, yeah. Maybe, wow. So the beginning of that season, like right before the beginning of
I think it was the group stages of the Champions League.
All right.
And then we get there, and I read the Gazzetta most days. My dad always used to have it every day. So there was a Gazzetta in the hotel, and I'd read it, and we saw a little article saying Watford, so we were all excited, saying that we're in the paper. And then it said Mourinho's going to play some players who didn't travel last night. I think they were playing in Ukraine at the time for the Champions League game to get them some match fitness. So we ended up actually playing against Adriano, Crespo, Olivier Dacourt, Victor Obina.
Oh man, what a throwback!
And Walter Samuel. So actually at home I've got Crespo's shirt with Adriano's signature on it. So that's the only time I wear an Inter shirt, if I put that on.
Fair enough. And how was it, like, of these players, which one is the one that stood out the most to you on the pitch?
All of them, to be honest. And they, like you say, they were playing against young boys. So for them, it was like playing in the park. But they were just on a different level, and without trying. I think it was 5-0 at half time, and then I think respectfully they just kind of stopped. But we didn't care. They could have lost 20-0. I didn't care. As soon as the final whistle went, we ran towards them trying to get their shirt.
Were they nice guys? Yeah. Did you manage to chat with them at the end?
Yeah. So when after we got changed and stuff, Adriano kind of, before he got into his lovely, I think, blue Ferrari, I think at the time, or black, we were waiting for him and he signed all our shirts and stuff like that. So yeah, they were really nice.
Man, Adriano, I've got a little story about Adriano. A friend of mine is obsessed. L'Imperatore. A friend of mine really is obsessed with Adriano. Like, I've heard him say things about Adriano that was just like, man, like, you're the fan. If I was famous, I wouldn't want to have, like, you sound like a creep. But 2 years ago, I think, people knew that Adriano would be attending an Inter game, and my friend managed to get through a friend. He managed to get a ticket for the VIP, like near the VIP section, so he could get a selfie with Adriano, a picture with Adriano. And he managed to take a picture. And when you look at that picture, they look like two guys that have known each other their entire life. They're like hugging like this. Adriano has the biggest smile on his face. And it's not the first time that my friend has the luck to meet a famous football player, former football player. And he said Adriano's attitude was just incredible. He asked me my name. He was just like, so what are your hopes for this season and everything? Do you play football? He said it was like a 30-second chat, but he genuinely like wanted to take that picture. And now that selfie that they took, they just look like two buddies who have reunited after 10 years. Brilliant. You know, great attitude. Yeah. What about over in England? Other great players you remember playing against or with?
Played against, let's think. Would have been young Jack Grealish.
Oh, okay.
Maybe young, and he's young now, but Calvin Phillips, a few years ago, we played Leeds. And obviously they're coming up. Tom Huddleston, played against him for Hull. Obviously, I think he ended up getting a few caps for England. I'm trying to think. I think they're the main ones, to be honest. We had normally in the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup, you would draw kind of the bigger teams. Let's say if you got far enough, and Leeds, Hull, Cardiff at the time when they were in the Premier League, they're the main ones. Never really got to play against like the big boys.
This might be a really harsh question, Piero, but was there one player that you thought would make it, but maybe for whatever reason didn't like excel to the standards that they were showing at the early stages?
Besides
there's
yourself,
a few.
Of course.
There's a few, but I wouldn't want to like name names. But
that's fair enough.
There's some that were ridiculously talented. And they could do things with a football that I couldn't do. But maybe I ended up having a kind of a full, I consider it a full career. When you get hit 10 years for me, that's a full career. So I think I've done 12 years in the professional game. So for me, it's a privilege and an honor, because I know how hard that is, especially mentally, to keep going. And sometimes the talent, you need more than the talent, unfortunately. And the talent, I think, is like one of the smallest parts of it.
Yeah, also like so many careers just stopped by injuries. What can you do with that? Like if you were born with a bad knee, like you cannot do anything about it. Big question, Piero, but I feel like you've got an answer for everything. So I think you've already thoroughly thought about this. If you had made it up to the national teams, would have you picked England or Italy?
There's no discussion on that. Italy.
Yes, correct answer.
I've been brought up Italian, so I fully consider myself Italian. So yeah, for me it's a no-brainer. When Italy play England, that's a stressful match for me.
Can imagine. And on that point, then let's talk about Serie A in particular. We talked offline about the great season that AC Milan had, and you were privileged to go and see them against Atalanta, which was an amazing atmosphere as well. But what did you make of that entire season, just generally? Because I think it had loads of twists and turns. Obviously, we had the likes of Napoli potentially looking like they might crack it and actually win it. For Tommy's benefit, obviously, we won't talk about Inter Milan, but yeah,
we can.
Piero, how did you make it?
If Tommy wants to, we can talk about Radu and Inter Bologna.
Let's focus on other things. I think there is an episode of last year's pod where I just go off. But yeah, man, that was Like, okay, no, I have a question about that. When you see that happen to a professional footballer, now consider yourself an impartial fan. Of course, you were cheering because it meant a lot for AC Milan. But when you see that happen, what do you think is going through the player's mind? Because for somebody external, I try to think of the dumbest thing that I could do on my job. And I'm like, ooh, that would be bad. Like, I wouldn't know how to find an excuse. So what do you think is going on through a player's head? Of course, there is massive pressure on their shoulders in that moment.
Yeah, you're right. I did say that actually. I think to a friend or a family member. Of course, as a fan, I was over the moon. But then straight away, my head goes to thinking as a player and feeling for the player, and I felt gutted for him, to be honest, because you've been waiting all season to play. You end up playing in probably the biggest game of the season because it's the game they got to make up to try and get the points on Milan, and that happens, and you just I felt sorry for the boy. I honestly did. Obviously, competitiveness wise, it was great facing Milan, but I did really feel for him because that is like the worst thing that could happen to him.
Do you think it's like what are you thinking? Are you thinking, has that ever happened to you when you do a big mistake? Is it lack of concentration? Is it that you're too concentrated and therefore it goes into being nervous a little bit too?
I'm not sure. I don't think I've made a mistake that big. Obviously, as a goalkeeper, that
the chances are always higher. Yeah,
that can only happen to a goalkeeper because if I let the ball go through my foot, there'll be a defender, another midfielder behind with a goalkeeper. If they're standing in front of goal, it's only going one place. But it could be sometimes it's he might have been thinking already where he was going to pass it before he's even controlled it.
Mm-hmm.
He just thinks, well, it's an easy. I'm just going to control it, and then so he might be looking almost thinking he's just going to control it because that's what he does, and then sometimes that happens. So yeah, it's hard to kind of pinpoint why.
Yeah,
but it's a disaster.
But let's talk about AC Milan. Come on, let's move on. Let's talk about AC Milan. What did you feel about last season? Did you expect at the beginning of the season? Did you think that was even in the realm of possibilities? And how did you live the season last year?
Yeah, I think it was because we talk about the season just gone where they won it, but the season before they were outstanding, and they went on a run which was crazy. And in all honesty, I know Inter were good with Conte, but I thought Inter won the league more because Milan dropped off than Inter pulling away. Milan had in January or February, we had a bad month and we dropped off too far. But otherwise than that, I thought we were brilliant, and it's the best I've seen them play. So coming into this season, I knew we'd be up there. And to be honest, I thought we should have won the league more points because Inter slipped up a couple of times. That Inter had a bad run, and we didn't make the most of it. We drew to Udinese, we lost to Salernitana. There was someone else, and that was after Inter. That's after Inter had either lost or drawn their match. So that means we would have pulled points. So if anything, I think the gap should have been bigger. But it was a good league. Napoli, from what I understand and from what I remember, and I've always said when Juve were winning the league every year, that Serie A wouldn't be back until Inter and AC Milan are back.
Yeah,
because historically they're the rivals of Juventus. Napoli and Roma, they're not real rivals. They always get there and then towards the end they drop off, and they get there and they drop off, and they've always done that. So I always said Serie A wouldn't be back unless the two Milanese clubs will be back, and that's proven the case. And now Juve have got a challenge on their hand because it seems like Inter and Milan are going to keep getting stronger, even though Milan's calciomercato right now isn't too great, to be honest.
Yeah, a little bit. We're recording, by the way, for the listeners and viewers, we're recording on June 30th. We don't know when. We don't know yet when we will release this interview. By the way, what I said on last year's pod and what I keep telling my friends, the majority of my friends are AC Milan fans, and I just love that the banter is back in town, that big inner town rivalry is back. It really feels like back in the day. And now there is the race for the second star, and That's exciting, and I'm shitting my pants at the same time. I'll say it. But Piero, what about your present? So, what are your plans for the future, for the present and for the future now?
So I've become a dad last year.
Congrats.
So cheers. So that was obviously kind of a life-changing experience. So my family's obviously forefront of my mind, and football, really, football, and helping people. I study kind of it's called personal performance coaching, helping people achieve goals or targets in either their work, their life, their business. Something I'm very passionate about, and then that mixed along with football coaching, sometimes a bit of media work for Serie A, some scouting. Sometimes I just kind of, I feel like I'm more involved in football now than when I was playing, and I thoroughly enjoy it, to be honest.
And do you still play? Do you still play with your friends, with former teammates?
Not former teammates, but I play with my friends. There's actually quite a few Italians that live near me, and we play every Tuesday night. So that's a good challenge. I get kicked a lot, but it's good. It's good.
You live in London, yes?
Yeah, it's kind of Surrey, southwest London, kind of.
I have a friend who told me who lived in London for 5 years, and he told me, he's Italian, and he told me that there is a massive circuit of Italians playing football in England, and some of them even get super exclusive. They just want to play among Italians.
Yeah, there's loads of, like, as we know, there's loads of Italians in England, especially in London. So there's actually quite a few. I saw there's like a AC Milan club, and they play in a tournament against other clubs, and yeah, if you start looking online, there's loads of Italian football going on.
And what is your favorite pick? Calcetto, 5-a-side, 7-a-side, 11-a-side? What do you usually play on these Tuesday night matches?
It depends on how many people we have. So it could be 7, it could be 8, no more than 8, I don't think. But I'm getting myself ready for Calcetto when I go to Sicily in August.
But when you go to Sicily in August, you're going to be playing football.
Yes.
Man, I'm sweating already.
It has to be late at night, but we play.
Yeah.
I'll play with my friends. Again, I'll get kicked even more in Italy. But yeah, Calcetto out there, I love it. In the little kind of cage, little goals, and there's normally some scenic view of some mountain or something in the background. So yeah, I do love it.
And tell me if I'm correct, usually the guy who kicks you the most is this like 50-year-old guy who looks like he was a pretty good player, doesn't really move, plays as a center back now, and he always managed to get your shin. Is that correct?
Yeah, because he doesn't want to run, so he just thinks if I kick him, then he don't have to run.
But great sense of position. Great sense of position usually.
Always in the right position. Yeah, you're right.
Sorry, Adam, we really dove in the Italian cultural talk there.
No, it is fascinating to see it happen live as well, to be fair. I think we're coming towards the end of the interview itself, but Piero, I wanted to ask you, if there was one rule that you would change in football, what would that be?
Ooh, good question, Adam.
Is in the game?
Anything you'd like to change? Anything, because I think this is one of those where as fans we naturally go, like, we've heard like load of like rule changes, for example, like even Arsene Wenger's talking about kick-ons as opposed to throw-ons, for example, and changes with offside rules, and VAR, for example, is another topic, right? But yeah, as a player yourself, if there was one rule that you feel that should be changed for the benefit of the game, what would you go for?
I won't change anything to do with the game, because I'm pretty happy with how the game goes so far. It would probably be, just off the top of my head, some sort of cap on, and I don't mean how much they can earn, but how much they can access younger players. Okay. So let's say they're on 50 grand a week. They can only access a certain amount of it, and the rest gets looked after. They have to put it away.
It's almost like
just because, because I think when you start getting players 17, 18, 19 on silly money, and some haven't even played for the first team, I sometimes think, well, what is the motivation?
Yeah.
Are they going to lose motivation because they don't actually have to get to the first team anymore to maybe be set for life? So I think if you actually looked, I think we would have lost some extremely talented footballers because they didn't have to push anymore.
No, that's fascinating, because actually thinking about that, I kind of remember those stories of apprentices having to clean the boots of the first teamers, and that doesn't happen these days, I suspect, especially at the bigger clubs, right? You might see it at lower leagues, but very rarely would you see it at the big clubs. And yeah, I think you've kind of touched on something there, because there's been a lot of stories where you've had those talented players that haven't maybe progressed to the anticipation that a lot of people had on them. And yeah, their careers, I mean, you only have to look at the career of like Freddie Adu, for example, as one example, where there's that height of expectation with him when he was 14 years old coming out of DC United. And yeah, he ended up doing like random spells in like Poland and Eastern Europe, like before. We've never heard of him since. So yeah, it's very interesting. Tommy, did you have any other questions?
Look, Piero, thank you so much for coming on. And I also I really enjoy meeting, players who've had a career like yours, because you actually get a better feel of how the career of a footballer really is. So the starts, the loan spells, traveling up north, which sounds like, whenever I hear somebody from England, I'm not very knowledgeable of England, but whenever I hear going up north, playing up north, it sounds very Lord of the Ring like. It sounds like this wild land where it always rains. And then you mentioned like going back south. It was a great feeling. So man, I really loved the hearing everything about it. Good luck with your future plans. Good luck with your child again. And expectations. We're recording on June 30th. If the league was to start tomorrow, expectations for AC Milan? Is the second star on the way?
Not unless they sign some players.
Who would you go for?
I don't know who I'd go for. I'd want Renato Sanchez, but I think he might be going to PSG.
Yeah.
We lost Botman to Newcastle, so I don't know, because I don't know how much money they've got to spend. They need to sign Maldini and Masada because they haven't signed them yet, and I think that's why everything's taking so long. But you just see it, Juventus and Inter going to another level. If Inter they've signed Lukaku, they signed Mkhitaryan, if they signed Dybala, I mean, I actually want to see Dybala, Martinez, and Lukaku. That would be unbelievable.
Yeah, Çalhanoğlu and Mkhitaryan. I don't know who is going to defend in that team.
It doesn't matter. And then if Juventus obviously signed Pogba. If they end up signing, for example, Di Maria, for me, Di Maria will be the best player in the league by a mile, because he's unbelievable. So then it just makes me think Milan might be a little bit too far off that, because we still have Ibra, who won't be back until the new year, and Giroud, who he can't play every game. So there's a few doubts. The defense is good. Defense with Tomori, Kalulu, Hernandez, Calabria, and obviously Magic Mike in goal.
What a signing, man! I keep whenever I read the AC Milan squad and I see who you've got in goal and who we've got in goal, I'm like, damn it, that was good business right there.
He was unbelievable. So yeah, I'm not sure if Inter have signed a few. If Juve go and sign, like I said, Pogba, Di Maria, and then Chiesa's back, it's gonna be a good league. Roma will be okay with Mourinho. Their enthusiasm and atmosphere at the moment is going crazy. I saw how they sold, I think, 30,000 season tickets. So that all of a sudden, Roma away, you don't want to play there all of a sudden.
Definitely.
Great. Well, good luck also to AC Milan. Come on, let's be.
I'll come and see you in Milan. We'll go for pizza.
Definitely, pizza and beer. That's the way to do it. Okay. Maybe for a derby. Come for the derby.
Yeah, we'll sort it out.
Beautiful. Adam,
No, thank you, Piero, and thank you, Tommy, as ever.
Guys,
Thank you.
remember to follow us if you're listening or watching. Follow us everywhere. We've really taken over the internet now. There is no excuse. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Even just open the TikTok page. What are we? Who are we? OnlyFans is next. Only next. And then the sky. That's the limit. But guys, thank you so much for joining. Piero, any way listeners can get in touch with you?
Instagram, Piero Mingoia. Nice and simple. Yeah, get in touch. Any interest in football, always open to discuss football. So send me a message.
Golazo!